Okay, good morning. Welcome back. Shalom Aleichem. We are up to Shmuel Bey's Perek Gimel. We are towards the end of the Perek, and the end of a very, very important and challenging story. Avner really notices Avner is the Sar Tzava, the general for Ishboshet, and he realizes that Ishboshet is not destined to be the next leader of the Jewish people. He's not the right king, and really David should be king. He sends back channel messages to David Hamelech and eventually meets with him. He gets everyone together and on David's side, and he meets with David in Hebron to make a bris, to make a covenant together, and to really bring back Am Yisrael into one nation, right? Which is where we always should be. And as right when Avner leaves this meal, in walks David's Sar Tzava, David's general, who is Yoav. Yoav happens to also be David's nephew, and he really always has David's back and protects him, perhaps to a fault. And he tells David that you made a grievous error here. This guy, Avner, does not have your back. He is only here to trick you. He's deceiving you. You are too nice. You are too good. You want peace too much. And this is the wrong man to make peace with. So what happens next? Right? So if you're here, right, and we're learning this story, we know a lot more about what has happened in this story. We know that Avner just didn't show up one day and say, let's make peace. He brought back Michal to David Hamelech. He went already to all the leaders, all the Zakanim of all the tribes, to tell them that David is the man, David's the king, to garner a lot of political clout for David and to support for David Hamelech. So Yoav comes in and he says in Pasuk Chafei 25 over here, Yadates Avner Ben ki lefatosecha ba. He has come only to deceive you. He only came to take your strategies and to steal your plans. And that's why he's here. He's here, and he's going to use all the information that you have given him and he has seen and he's experienced against us. Vayetze Yoav me'im David. Yoav leaves David's presence, right? It sounds pretty dramatic, the way that he is. David is the king, and generally the king is the one that says, okay, now you can leave my presence. That's generally the way that it works with the king. Yoav himself is outraged, and he leaves. Vayishlach malachim acharei Avner. And he sends messengers to go run ahead to catch Avner before he leaves Hebron. David's headquarters right now is in Hebron. Vayeshivu oso mi bor hasira, v'David lo yada. And Avner got up to a location that was called Bor Hasira, and they brought him back from this location. Right? What exactly did they do to get him to come back? What did they do? So they said that David has one more thing to share with you. Right? He lied. Right? He lied. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says Bor Hasira. Bor is a pit, and Sira is a pot. So the Gemara says that there are two things that caused this to happen, that Avner is going to be murdered, a Bor and a Sira. Al shelo hichzik divrei David b'tzapachas hamayim shelakach mirosh hasav shel Shaul v'gam hakanaf ha'me'il shel Shaul amar shema echad min asirim nechaz bo v'karau. There are two things that Avner did to warrant the end of his life. Number one, a bore, a pit of water. Water. What does that mean? That he anointed Ishboshet and not David. And number two, when Shaul's coat was ripped by David. Remember back, several prakim ago, when David had the opportunity to murder and to kill Shaul, he didn't, and instead he ripped his coat. Avner said, no, David's probably making that story up. It wasn't him. It probably got ripped on the with some thorns, with sirim or thorns also, and that's what happened. Don't give me this story that over here. So Avner was again a loyalist to Shaul, and maybe was also an agitator to David as well. Vayashev Avner Chevron. So Avner now returns back to Hebron, and he's walking back into Hebron. Presumably, he has some type of group with him. Maybe it's a small group because he does not want the word to get out. Vayatehu Yoav el toch hasha'ar. Yoav himself took him towards the gates. So now everything here in the Gemara is darshaned out to have an additional meaning. What does this mean according to the Gemara? So Avner, back in Perek Beis, killed Avner, Yoav's brother, Asael. So he brings him to the Sha'ar. The Sha'ar is a euphemism for the Sanhedrin. So he brings him to Sanhedrin to bring him into courts. That's the way some say it. The simple interpretation is he brings him off to the side towards the gate as if to tell him some secrets. When you bring somebody, you don't speak to somebody in the middle of the road. If you're just, if you tell them, hello, shalom aleichem, that's fine. But something private, come off to the side and let's talk. L'daber ito basheli. Basheli means, one interpretation is secretly, privately. Come, let's talk privately. The Rashi, who's going with the Gemara's interpretation, is Basheli bishkaga shlohavin avne shebelibo lahargo. So he brings him to a place of Sheli, which means that he wants to accuse Avner of murdering his brother, not bishogeg, but really on purpose. And what happens when he brings him into this private area and talks to him? He says, Laveyakehu Sham HaChomesh. He murders him in the fifth rib. If you're on, this is the fifth rib that we spoke about last week, right? He kills him in the most effective way possible. Vayamas Bidam Asael Achiv, and he kills him with the blood, right? This is a vengeance killing because he killed his brother. Now Avner is getting killed by Yoav. So you see here in the Gemara here, puts these two murders together. When Yoav accuses him of murder, he says to him, so Avner says back to him, Asael, your brother was going to kill me, and the halacha is, Habar lahorgo, hashkim lahorgecha. If someone's going to kill you, you're allowed to murder them. So the truth is, the Gemara has an opinion over there, Masechet Sanhedrin, that if you're able to shoot them in the foot or stop them without killing them, then that's what you should have done. So Yoav demanded of Avner that you are an expert marksman. You knew better. You did not have to kill him in this moment. You could have, injured him in his foot. He wouldn't have chased after you. And Shalom al Yisrael. Instead, you killed him. So Avner, while Yoav was waiting for the basin to decide what to do in this case, the Gemara says that he took matters into his own hands and he killed him. Okay, in the fifth rib, the exact same place. So he puts the murders together. And this is a tremendous tragedy. This is a huge tragedy. Here is a moment where the Jewish people are separate, right? And one group wants to bring Klal Yisrael back together, right? Which usually has to happen through back channels. One person's not involved or is angry about it on the other side, and bam, major problems, right? Someone gets murdered, and this can set the Jewish people back so many years. Usually, you see here, I think some very important lessons, but you see here that generally the most extremists on either side are not the leaders themselves, generally, not always, but it's usually the followers, ones that feel they need to protect their leader, that do things in extreme ways that their leaders wouldn't necessarily agree with. So you see here with Yoav. Yoav is going above and beyond what David would ever consider, right? He's trying to protect him, and out of overprotection and out of over cautiousness, he murders another person. But Yashav Avner Chevron. Sorry, Pasuk Chavches. But Yishma David Me'acharechem. Now, what is David's role going to be here? How is David going to manage this? David, on one hand, how is he going to react to Yoav taking matters in the law into his own hands? And how is he going to deal with Avner getting killed? This is a public tragedy. And people are going to watch him. What is he going to do here? Vayishma David me'acharechen, vayomer naki anochi umamachti mi'im Hashem ad olam, midmei Avner ben Ner. When David heard of this, his immediate reaction was to say, I was not a part of this. I am completely innocent in this murder. This is not what I had intended at all. At all. Yachulu al Rosh Yoav, well, kol beis aviv. And David gives a klala, a curse, to the house of Yoav and to his progeny. A curse should fall on the house of Yoav. Al kol beis aviv, al yikares mi beis Yoav, zav umitzora umachzik plach, bapelech v'nofa b'chera v'chuser lechem. He says that it wasn't only Yoav, but the people that colluded with Yoav as well, which we'll see who that is in a moment. They should have in their family several misfortunes that should happen to them. They should have somebody that suffers from become a Zav, somebody that suffers and becomes a Mitzora, somebody that is a Machzik Bapelach, that handles spindle. Sorry. Some interpret they should lean on crutches. The one who is slain by the sword, and one person who is lacking bread, who is impoverished. So why did David pick these things to curse Yoav with? So the Medrash explains that Hashem often blesses tzaddikim with several different great physical attributes: beauty, wisdom, wealth, strength, and long life. So what David is doing here is that he is giving people Yoav the exact opposite. He's giving him the exact opposite midos of these. And the Abarbanel suggests another explanation about these 5 curses. David thought that Yoav's actions might have been prompted by 3 considerations. Number 1, that Avner would now become David's greatest confidant. Number 2, Yoav wanted to eliminate his general. And number 3, Yoav himself would lose the opportunity to become this general. So what did David do? David gave 5 curses to Yoav. If Yoav wanted to prevent a friendly relationship between David and Avner, so Yoav's family should have contaminated men, Zavs and Mitzoras, who live separate than everybody else because of their Tumah status. If he was motivated because of military showmanship, I'm better than you, then he wanted to show that you're going to be weak. You're going to have people in your family that are leaning on crutches. Rather than holding swords, they'll hold crutches. They'll fall by the sword. And if it was about financial security that you're going to lose your job, you're going to have people in your home that are going to lack food. So these go exactly with unclear what the motivation was for Yoav, but it could be that it was all three. But you're going to get Mida Keneged Mida, exactly what your motivation was. A very amazing Abarbanel over here. The pasuk continues, "V'Yoav v'Avishai achiv hargu la'Avner al asher hemis asael achiem b'givon b'milchama." Right, and the pasuk testifies now very clearly that Yoav wasn't in this alone. Yoav had a brother named Avishai. There are three brothers, three nephews of David: Yoav, Avishai, and Asael. They're called the Bnei Tzuria. Tzuria was David's sister, and these three boys were part of David's army. And Yoav and Avishai tag teamed. They worked on this together to kill Avner. So David responds to Yoav by giving him a very severe curse in his family. This is a very reactive, right, knee-jerk reaction. I'm going to immediately, and you have to sometimes as a king, you have to show immediate reaction that you do not agree with what happened. You absolutely, this is not on, on your cheshbon. Vayomer David el Yoav, el kol ha-mesherito. And then he commanded Yoav and everyone that was with him, Kiru bigdeichem v'chigru sakim, wear sackcloths and rip your clothing. V'siftu lifnei Avner v'melech David holech acharei hamita. They prepared him for burial. They carried him, and they had everybody act in a mourning fashion. Vayikbur az Avner b'chevron v'isa hamelech eskolo vayifk al kever Avner vayifku kol ha'am. They all walked him out, right? They all did halvayas hames, and they buried him in Hebron, right? That's a big statement. They sent his body back. They buried him with the Kivrei David, with the Mishpachas Kvarim in Hebron. I think we know where it is today. I think we know where Avner, or more or less where Avner is buried today, in Hebron. And recently I was there in October on my mission. We spent a day in Hebron. So I went, they have they built a shul, like a base medrash, near the Kvaros of Rus and Yishai. It's very cool. And I was with Roy Barb. We went on a special 1 day trip, half a day trip with the two of us. It was very amazing. Now, David is actively showing that he is mourning, actively commanding everyone of his team to mourn along with this, which is very important. Vayikonin hamelach el Avner, vayomer hakamus naval yamus Avner. And now David gives a eulogy. Back then it was called a dirge, a kina, like that we have on, in Tisha B'Av, kinos. He said a kina about Avner. He really trusted Avner and thought that with Avner around, they could really come to a moment of peace. Yadacha lo asiros ragalacha lo nechushtim hugashu info lifnei bnei avla nafalta v'yosifu kol ha'am lifkos alav. Your hands were not bound, your feet were not put in fetters, but you fell as one falls. Meaning, you were not. This was not a war. This was not a fight. You were tricked and you were killed. And everyone continues to cry over him. Vayavo kol ha'am lahavros as David lechem ba'od hayom ve'yishavat. David le'mor ko yasel ko Yosef ki lifneim o shemesh etan lechem o kol uma. David himself, after the funeral, fasts. He fasts. He wants to be very, very clear in a very public manner that what he is doing right now is that he is in mourning. This is bad. This is the bad thing. He had nothing to be involved with this. There's always going to be. Right? You think conspiracy theorists were created in the 20th century or the 21st century? No. There are always people that were conspiracy theorists, and even back then. Unless you think that David was involved, I am fasting today. I am not doing anything happy or joyous on this day. The Chol Ha'am, the Ikiru, Vayita B'neihem. All the people recognized David's motivations, and they understood what was happening. And they saw that everything that David did was good. It was very clear, crystal clear to the entire nation that David was not involved in this death at all. At all, kihuzah, and that was very important to David. If he wants to eventually become king over the Jewish people, and he ultimately does not want any fighting between Klal Yisrael, he needs to be very, very clear about this. Vayomer HaMelech El Avadav. Halo teidu ki sar begadol nafal hayom hazeh beYisrael. You should know that a great man died today. Vanochi hayom rach u'mashuach melech. And today I'm very, very weak. Even though they anointed me as king, I'm mashuach melech. V'anashim ha'ela b'nei Tzuriya kashim mimeni. These children of Tzuriya, my nephews, are harsher than me. They're very savage. That's the interpretation here, the JPS interpretation. Too savage for me. Yishalem Hashem la'osei hara kira. So Hashem should pay back the people that do evil with evil. With evil. David ultimately here does not punish Yoav himself. You can argue that the punishment for punishing someone's children is even harsher. His children weren't around. They weren't old enough yet. Who knows? It's going to happen with his children. Maybe it's going to happen with his grandchildren, perhaps. David doesn't punish Yoav. You can argue there were no witnesses to what happened, so it's hard to prove it. You could say maybe he was afraid of him, or he knew that that Yoav's devotion was real, and he was extremely loyal to David HaMelech. Like I said earlier, loyal to a fault. It could be David was afraid of Yoav, and if he really did fire him or sentence him to death, if we're going to see David's not afraid to do, that might cause more ripples than not, and that may be a bigger thing. Or David, out of his extreme humility, might think that, you know what, Yoav made it was a one-off. This is a big mistake, but it's not going to happen again. Yoav's not going to do something like this again. It's a one-off thing. And we're going to have to look at this carefully about how leaders keep their followers, followers in general, at bay. How careful are they? How forgiving are they? David was a very forgiving man. Should he be forgiving of Yoav in this case? He is. And is it going to help in his favor? Is Yoav going to learn his lesson? Or is this just going to continue down a very terrible rabbit hole? Okay, it's not going to happen right away, but as we continue learning the Sefer, we'll track and understand Yoav's motivations, his loyalty, and this relationship between David and his nephew, Yoav. Okay, wish everybody a meaningful day. May it be a day where the hostages should be healthy and they should, Bezrat Hashem, come back, and our Chaylim should continue to stay strong and come back home very soon.
Amen.